Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Graham Brookman.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks everyone for putting up with me tonight. I have been sort of a captive of the Gawler area for a long time, so went through Roseworthy Agricultural College and guessed who was the president of the council, and Bruce Eastick, of course, and so then I disappeared for about 7 years, and my father had actually applied for a job for me at Roseworthy, so I ended up back here in beautiful Gawler, and so a fair bit of my life's been spent up here, though I came originally from Adelaide and am a city's liquor. I want tonight to not so much talk about just what Anna Marie and I have done with this little piece of paradise, but its history from the year dot in terms of humans. And so we start with the Gawler people, and they certainly occupied our little patch of land, and it was a very bountiful place. So plenty of animals to eat, plenty of native tucker to eat, and really the Gawler River has functioned as a big linear supermarket, I guess, as the Gawler moved backwards and forwards from the caves up, particularly in the South Para River, winter shelters, down to the beach for a bit of fishing in the summer, and of course most people in Gawler haven't ever seen the art which is in those caves, which is absolutely terrific, but is not being maintained, unfortunately, at this stage. So I won't add anything to that, because the Anglo history is really very, very interesting to me, and I thank Adrian Shackley for actually doing a little bit of searching at one stage when he was nominating our place for a heritage place kind of mention, where he discovered the beginnings of the land title system for the area concerning our piece of land, which is part of section 5200 of Manopara. So Gawler was the first country town, and old William Light was hammering away up here with his colleague Boyle Finnis, and they'd sort of set up this surveying firm, and at that stage it was very important to the state that the land be released on an orderly basis, and they couldn't really release it until the boundaries had been defined, and so surveying was in, and they thought they were going to make a big go of it, but in fact it didn't do all that well, and we ended up with a bit of the kind of New South Welsh kind of I was here first, this is my bit of land in the end, but Gawler was like they played it by the book, and so it was all surveyed, and of course Churchill was the very first bit that got their attention, but in the case of Gawler, it was a group of people that got together, and there was a special survey which Light sort of presided over, and they kind of got hold of the land and then organised for it to be divided and so forth, and presumably made a few bob out of it. It didn't do Light a lot of good, because he died, relatively soon after that, and I'm thinking that Finnis probably continued with his division of land in the area. Anyway, there was this very colourful character, John Ragless. He'd come as a fairly young man, and his first sort of job when he stepped ashore was to run a pub in the West End of Adelaide. So characterful kind of a character with a decent sense of his self-importance and a fairly short fuse, I gather. So he really liked to get stuff done. He didn't like to be mucked around, and so he got a grant, and I'm not sure if we can really call it a grant. Today a grant is when you just get something for nothing, but in those days the grant was, well, you'll get something for £1 an acre. And so he got his acreage just west of Gawler, so where the river settles down out onto the flatland, which is good farming country, and that is where we are. He got that bit of land, and at that stage he opened up the first flour mill in Gawler, and a bit later he joined up with King, who was one of that early consortium of people that divided the joint up, and they ran a pretty decent sort of mill for a while, and then King got disgusted with, I presume, Ragless' sense of humour, and he, Ragless, disappeared off down to Adelaide to Jepps Cross, where he set up this bloody great mill called the Montague Mill, and it was capable of dealing with very large quantities of grain. And of course, we've got to think, you know, where's the food coming from and going to? And South Australia actually survived a lot on Tasmanian tucker for the first little while. It would just come in by ship, but fairly quickly we were exporting stuff to Sydney, of course, as we still do. Still don't look after themselves at all. So John had numerous brothers, and he and Richard sort of ran that big mill down at Jepps Cross, but the family, they were goers, and so they'd just disappear out into the Donga and sort of get a grant for a great lump of territory, paying almost nothing for it. And so a place called Farina, goodness knows where it is, somewhere near Maree anyway. I guess the guys that do the bush bash probably go roaring through it. But anyway, impossible to get to, but they set up a station up there, and soon we're bringing large amounts of wool down to Adelaide for sale, and so on. Now, apart from that, there was this kind of family holiday. They all got together and decided they're all going to go to Victoria digging for gold. And so everyone in South Australia seemed to do this, and you could get it. It was just alluvial gold. It was just lying around, just a matter of puddling away, and eventually you'd get a fair bit, and then you'd cash it in, and then you'd come back and you'd buy yourself a piece of land, or similar, which is exactly, of course, what he did. But he bought himself a whole lot of land, and he kept on buying and selling and buying and selling, and the price of land was steadily increasing, and he was getting richer and richer. And in fact, he was, in the end, a very important person with a great deal of dough. Meanwhile, the brother, Oliver, he also went on that trip, and there is a fascinating book written by him about his Kangaroo Flat farm. And he was virtually a neighbour of Roseworthy Agricultural College when they dreamed it up, and it was partly because Ragless, a good farmer, very conchy, participated in the commission, Royal Commission, about farming practices in South Australia, and pointed out a whole lot of deficiencies that were at play, and he was right there when the Parliament decided that Roseworthy was a great idea, a place to train farmers and young farmers to actually farm sustainably. And of course at Roseworthy they worked out the business about superphosphate, and suddenly the farming, which was going really badly by that time, suddenly came good. Well, I didn't realise how involved my family, the Brookmans, was with the Raglesses, but my great-great-grandfather Ben, he lost his wife, which he seemed to do. They must have been very careless back in those days, but anyway, shortly later he married, of course, Charlotte Ragless, who was the daughter of John. And so we've been joined at the hip ever since, and you've had Benjamin Ragless Brookman and Benjamin Brookman Ragless and Lily Brookman, who was Ragless, and Brookman and vice versa. I mean, it was getting towards incest, I think, in some cases. It was very, very close relationship. Anyway, the Brookmans say that they hadn't sort of raced off over the horizon becoming farmers, unlike Ragless. They were chasing dough in other directions. So it was sort of as a grocer slash accountant slash entrepreneur that George Brookman, who was Benjamin's son, got involved with Silverton, and the thing that followed Silverton, which was, of course, Broken Hill, which may as well be part of South Australia, but it's not. But either way, they were having trouble holding the corporate structure together and capitalising all of the gear that was needed for mining up there. And he went to England, he organised gear, and he sort of really thumped the table when it came to how the company should be run. And so he was right up there in the formation of BHP, and the May brothers were the guys that did all of the machinery. Absolutely staggering. So the train used to run from the May brothers' foundry out to Gawler, and then they would rail stuff wherever they possibly could. So very, very interesting stuff. And of course, we still have material made by the May brothers on the farm, because none of the people who had our piece of land ever threw anything away. They just parked it under a bloody gum tree, and the gum tree may well have died, but the poor old stripper's still standing there, still waiting for a clap. But there you go. Oh, sorry, a stripper is a harvesting machine.
Yeah, we worked it out.
Got it, good. You're allowed to laugh. Okay, so John has this piece of land. He's involved with millions of other things. He says, Tom, younger brother, look, you look after it, mate. And so Tom, who's a serious young fella, but he loved playing the fiddle. He even played the fiddle to the Aboriginal people, and he sounded like a really good guy. He took it over with his wife Charlotte, and so they were farming away merrily. And he bought some extra land. In fact, north of the river as well as south of the river, so next to the various dreaded people who I'll talk about later. And unfortunately, just after this venture to the goldfields with his brothers, Tom succumbed to pneumonia as a result of looking after his horses in the middle of the night and getting a cold and all the rest of it. So that, it's hard to see, but that's sort of a lump of Gawler that's several kilometres wide and long, and so it sort of shows that they had a fair bit of land. In fact, they and their various relatives had a fair bit of the Adelaide Plain. Now, Charlotte was not a little, shrinking flower. She, when Tom died, just kept on hammering away, acquiring more land and renting it out to people. Most of the land that their farm was on was rented out to a guy called Henry Locke, and another bit which had the house on it was also leased out to William Filsell. And anyway, so that was all good. The kids were growing up. She decides, I'll go to town, it'll be more civilised, there's good schools down there. Trinity wasn't thought of at that stage. And so off they went down to North Adelaide. And needless to say, she went to the same church as the Brookmans. George Hillyer, you've got the suburb, Hillyer, you've got 3 different Hillyer roads. For God's sake, do we really need... How many people get lost trying to find 123 Hillyer Road? Does that represent 100 metres per nomination? I don't know, but we get lots of confused people. And he worked in town for a while doing wheelwright work and that sort of thing. And then when Charlotte Ragless finally decided that she would sell off the old ancestral home, Hillyer snuck in and bought it. It was interesting that the Rodigers, who are on the opposite side of the river, next to that bit of land that Tom had bought, there were 2 brothers and they were fighting over who was going to get that bit of land. Meanwhile, George Hillyer heard about this, zipped down to Adelaide and bought the lot. So the argument was over because there wasn't any land to argue over anymore. Hillyer had the lot. And he had been farming for quite a while. He sounded like a really, good, organised kind of guy, very community-minded and so forth, and loved church. And so began this great romance between all of the churches and the Hillyers. I'm not quite sure how, but they seem to sponsor every kind of Protestant church that known to man. And but he was a good farmer, and so he was still kind of the patriarch when Gawler blocks was dreamed up, and that was, you know, for these unfortunates who were underpaid by Martins and the May brothers, you know, like people like that. I hope there's no relatives present. And they thought that it would be only fair if they got a little bit of land so that they could, you know, feed themselves. And they didn't realise how tough running a dry land farm actually is. It's a hard game, and these people didn't have a lot of experience. So, well, the Hillyers helped the blockers, but they also brought those up that fell over, and I think that Hillyer's, well, John Hillyer, George's son, ended up with 7 houses at least, and so George had a great wealth of children, and I'm sure that this business of living a long time has something to do with having a fair few children and keeping fit, and just generally keeping the children organised so that essentially it's go, go, go all day, physical work, long hours, lots of kids to organise, and so almost all of the people I've talked about actually lived for a long time, you know, like well above the expectation for men today, with all of our health services and so forth. Maybe they were just better genetic stock, I don't know, but there you go. And of course, Gawler blocks, I'm sure a lot of you have got been marinated in Gawler blocks if Brian's had anything to do with it. One of the brothers, Jabez Hillyer, he donated the land for the church, which is at Evanston Gardens /Hillyer/ whatever else, Gawler blocks. And I gather that if you are being formal, you actually accept the hall as being the Gawler blocks hall. And it was a Presbyterian church in this particular case, whereas the families all went to Todd Street. Okay, John Hillyer turned our piece of land into virtually a food forest. They had so many types of fruit, animals, you know, they made bacon, butter, they didn't make cheese, but, you know, it was just a lack of time. And the other thing is that I think they really knew how to organise the kids. Murray, who came next, complained vigorously about having to clean the silverware on a Saturday afternoon when the girls went to tennis, which was, I mean, I would have been absolutely, you know, disgusted if that had happened to me too, but I didn't have any sisters, so it didn't actually come up. But there you go. And all of these guys are involved in the Gawler show, and they were involved in many of the community organisations and so forth. But above all, you know, this guy was a fantastic farmer. He was an Australian farmer. He kind of inherited all of his dad's tricks that he'd learned, you know, the hard way, having come out from England, and away it went. So he was dairying, he showed his horses and so on. He was a very successful farmer. I just want to make one other small connection with the Brookmans. Almost certainly, Hillyers took some of their beautiful sheaf hay into Gawler, to just near the railway station. There was a big chaff mill, and that got compressed and sent to South Africa in the Boer War. The top horse, I think you'll probably recognise it, yes? North Terrace, King William Street, the war horse. That was donated by my great-grandfather.
Oh.
So there you go. So all of that money that he made with BHP was well worth it. So I regard the thing as just a model mixed farm, you know, where they had the milk, and of course the skim milk went to the pigs, and you know, it really was a very well linked kind of operation. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, you know, just be recreated. Someone should make a film of it, you know, a romance, and there was you know, interesting stuff going on. Okay, well then came Murray Clifford Hillyer, and I put the Clifford in because I live on Clifford Road. They had so many things called Hillyer that they just thought, oh, what's another name that we could use? Clifford. And so Murray, he had numerous siblings, and he died at about 94, and we just kind of got to him a year or so before he Hop the Twig, he was up at James Martin Village, and clear as a bell, and had a great chat to him. So it was absolutely marvellous. And you have to interpret this picture. It's really hard to see, but there's a hat up there, right? That's Murray Hillyer sitting on the supports, carrying the swing bridge across the Gawler River. Today that would probably cost $2 million, but John Hillyer just built it with a few mates, the roadiggers from across the river and so forth, so the kids could get across the river when it was in flood. And the Winkles used to come down. I presume Winkle Bridge hadn't been dreamed up at that stage, and they would all troop across to the little school at Luce, which is now Bookfelder. And so there you go. It's, and the last vestiges of that swing bridge were still there when we grabbed hold of the piece of land. Okay, so Murray was, you know, he's a modern man, he's an Aussie. He has some humour that wouldn't go down very well in feminine company today. He wrote some quite extensive notes about his life, and I've got them. And he was sharp, and so he was a member of the Institute. He was king of the. What am I doing?
No, go that way.
I need to go that way. Sorry, Brian. I don't want to spoil the movie. He was king of the Show Society for ages. He was a member of the Rifle Club. You know, like just absolutely up to there in community activities. And so I think, you know, he let the farming kind of cruise along. And they had a guy called Murray Parham, who was a really good, experienced sort of farm management type character who did a lot of the work on the place. And when Murray left, that was the end of the cows. Okay, they all thought these cows, they're a pain in the arse. You know, have to get up early and go to bed late, and you know, 7 days a week and so forth. But it kept them going through the Depression, and so the farmers actually had to look after a lot of other people during that period, and there were plenty of swaggies around and so on. Murray had actually invested in Canadian bloodlines for the Frisian cows that had replaced the Jerseys, because obviously bigger cows give you more milk, etc., etc. But there you go. And I guess Murray was into the labour saving stuff, and so, you know, they were doing pretty well. They, you know, a couple of Holdens, and, you know, they got rid of the windlass, and, you know, they got proper decent windmills, and so it was good. So Murray's son and daughter had pretty much left the farm, and he began to sell off the farm pretty much from the 1950s onwards. So there was bits being given here and bits being sold there and so on. You know, the cricket ground that was used by the Riverside Cricket Club was gifted to the Gawler Council. Now that's turned into the Gawler River Pony Club, etc., etc. He made a bit of money, I guess, selling part of the land for the creation of the Evanston Gardens Primary School, that great lump of land there. And so on. So he was divesting himself, and it was being picked up by various people. So you had a guy called Slipper, who was a nurseryman, and his kids didn't want to come out to bloody Gawler much too far. So it just sat there, and he just rented it out for quite a while. More as a house than anything else, and a lot of the land was just leased to farmers. Like Lloyd Modra, he had a bit of a run with that, and ultimately Graham Carter and Elsa bought the place in '74, and they grew cereals again. A bit of that was kind of Graham, and partly I think Lloyd was fucking around at the fringes, and we were very, very lucky to be able to buy the land that sort of surrounded the old Ragless block, the old Hillyer block, home block, because the Highways Department ripped the whole land off us, and that gave us enough capital to actually buy Graham and Elsa when they retired to Moonta Bay. But fond memories of Graham and Elsa, because she ran the photo shop in Gawler, and I'm a nutcase photographer. And back in those days, you had to go and get stuff developed and so on. So she was my good friend, and her pickles were pickled cauliflower was absolutely to die for. And Graham, of course, was a home brewer, as was I. So we enjoyed each other, and we said early on, hey, ever want to sell your place, don't go near a land agent, we will get it. And so we did. So that was sort of roughly how it was when we took it over, and we allowed Graham to just keep on cropping it, and we just put a few windbreaks in for a while. We would zap backwards and forwards to Europe, and eventually, you know, when we bought it from them, we made a few small renovations to the house, like ripped the bottoms out of all the walls to cure the salt damp, and generally kind of reorganised the stuff internally without Adrian interfering with the exterior part of the heritage listed building. As you can see, my son Tom was just a little bit surprised about what the bloody hell was going on in this work site, and how he didn't get killed, I have no idea. Well, just going back to sort of time at Roseworthy, I guess we were all thinking about the rest of the world, and you know, Club of Rome had, you know, sort of been fantasising about things and talked about limits to human growth and population and that sort of stuff, and we sort of realised that we were actually sort of smashing around the landscape pretty badly, and it would be really fun to have a look at a more sustainable way of using land in South Australia. The temperature changed, you know, in my lifetime there. You can see it's all red. It's even redder now. It's just about, you know, crimson. And you know, people started to dare to talk about population, and Dick Smith even got involved along with his Aussie mite and so on. And you know, that's a graph of our population. You can see the thing is the red one. That means red danger. And, you know, that's where we're roughly heading at the moment. We're meant to be controlling ourselves, and you know, everyone can actually have less children if they care to. The Vietnamese have done quite well with the two-child policy, and the Chinese are now following that. Yeah, we still, every one of us is a little cost centre, unfortunately, and in Australia, even with our very small population, we've managed to completely grind the Murray River to a halt for more than a year, with no water going out into the sea. And that, it's like not being able to urinate. It's not good for you. You will die. So then, where were we going to get our water from? And so there was more and more interest in our effluent, our stormwater, etc., etc. That's the beautiful Christie's Beach poo works. And it produces the most magnificent effluent water, which of course is converted into, you guessed it, the big reds of McLaren Vale. And so with most of our vegetables up here at Virginia being produced from effluent water and half of the wine from McLaren Vale, South Australia became one of the leaders in that sort of thing. But you know, that didn't look like it might be enough, and so we whacked in just a few kilometres down the coast, a desalination plant at O'Sullivan's Beach, and of course that was has been regarded as a bit of a joke, but it's deadly serious. And in Western Australia now, they have virtually no recruitment of water out of the hills. They have just about exhausted the water in the aquifer, and so they are now living on desalinated water. We've got to be close behind them. Because we are the driest city in the driest continent on the planet, and it's going to get worse very quickly, and I think we've had a taste of that in the last fortnight or so with Townsville, you know, Tasmania in flames. It's getting to be a violent place, and just quietly, slowly, we've got the sea creeping steadily upwards. It hasn't quite gone exponential, but it will go exponential fairly soon as gradually the Arctic and Antarctic ice melts. Well, all of that stuff kind of got introduced to us when we did a permaculture course with Bill Mollison. He was a Tasmanian renegade kind of character, made of petacundles, organics and all that sort of thing, not to be trusted, that sort of, you know, fairly warlike character, but he sounded very interesting, and he had worked with this young West Australian Dave Holmgren to produce this philosophy of permanent culture. So this permaculture stuff, and a lot of people think, oh, culture, is it a cult? No, it's two academics who are at the University of Tasmania working out a scientific way of actually allowing us to stay alive and well on the planet. And it gave us the inspiration, I guess, to work out why we had the piece of land, what we wanted to do with our lives. And so this was our mission. Basically, see if we could make this permaculture design stuff work. If so, promote it, teach people how to live more sustainably, and give our kids a reasonable kind of life on, like a John Hillyer farm, but maybe a bit more sustainable. Now, when you're planning such a thing, it's easy to get out a piece of paper and draw and do scale maps and so forth. And that's a good start. You can start to put the things that you want on your farm onto the paper. And so that sort of ordinary aerial map's okay. Some people can't read maps, and you need to have scale models. So you can just do a papier-mâché model, or go out to a sand pit and do a model with relief in it. And so we sort of get the juices wetted with these sketches and so forth, and then we're putting elements into the design. We're kind of populating the land and the concept. And this is one thing we thought, wow, wouldn't it be great not to use any water? Wouldn't it be great to have lots of people contributing lots of nutrition to our farm? Everyone who visits us, like the Chinese kind of landholders in days of old, harvesting the manure of their unfortunate workers because they didn't let them go home at night. They demanded they stay for 2 whole days. And so there you have it. And of course these things work, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. And they just become part of, this population. I don't know if anyone can read anything here, but let's just say we want in our design. Sorry,
No, you're right. You're right.
All right.
Yep.
We want to have chooks. We want to have chooks on this sustainable farm. All right. Well, the chook's not just standing there being a chook. It's picking up the windfalls from the tree crops. It's pooping, donating stuff to the soil, and then that goes to the trees and so forth. And it's eating pests, insect pests particularly. It's producing eggs daily. And we tell them regularly. And so you've got all these different elements. It's not just chooks, it's dairy cows, it's the things that you have, the tractor as an element. So you've got all these elements in the design, and they've all got to kind of connect with each other. And the more arrows you end up with, the more efficient your operation is actually likely to be in terms of energy. Now then it's a matter of how you make it work in terms of you and your energy. And so the whole business of technology and so forth, like computers that tell you, oh, the irrigation needs to be switched on, those sorts of things, we embrace. No worries about that. We're not Hutterites or Mennonites or whatever. And so Brian's quite right. We do have a whole lot of these things that say walnuts and home fruit and so on. So it is a spatial map, but it's also that energy map, that nutrient map. And we've still got them all there, but we're going to pull the walnuts out on the basis of Thursday a fortnight ago. They just all got burnt to a cinder, the actual nuts. So yeah, and it's just the last gasp. So we are changing. It is hotter. Everything's getting saltier. We need to use more shade, and so we need to adapt. And we need to adapt much faster than any other generation has ever adapted before. My next trip should be to Israel, because those guys really do stretch the edge. And what's that green thing there? Gawler River. That's our northern boundary. And we kind of tried to ignore it for a long time, and then I thought, oh, it's getting a bit dry. I reckon I'll whack a fire pump down there and we'll just bring a bit of juice up. And so we established some yabby ponds, and we had millions of yabbies. We were feasting on them all the time, but then we kind of ran out of luck, and the river didn't really work very well after a while. And last year, you know, and the year before we saw water in the river at 7,000 parts per million salt, which is toxic. You do not put that on any plant that you like. And so the river has become almost useless in a dry year. You really need pretty much a flood year, like a good steady flush out for quite some weeks before any decent water can be withdrawn. So there we are. We see Anna Marie works hard. We don't have 7 children, we only have 2, and they bloody well stay well clear of the farm. They really, they watch us and they, not us, no way, bye, I'm going to Tasmania, oh, I'm going to New Zealand, bye. And so there we are, still busting our gut on this place. And there they are, feasting. They come down when there's a feed, but in truth, they're both environmentalists, so paid jobs, and Tom, as you can see, has grown up to be a big fella, quite a bit bigger than me. That must have been the Dutch genes, I think, and crossbreeding, which usually gives you a little bit of hybrid vigour. So by this time we are making wine from our own grapes, and we're harvesting all sorts of things. We've got a vegetable garden that's going berserk. The community next door has said, grow for us, grow for us. People are ringing us up and saying, please, I've got cancer, I want organic food. And, you know, like, it was crazy stuff. And then, you know, we got to the point where we had really committed to pistachio nuts. I know it sounds kind of rather weird, but they actually grow pretty well in South Australia. The roots will go 30 metres to find water. 30 metres. And of course we've got 30 metres of soil where we are. It's all alluvium from our friends in the Barossa and the Adelaide Hills and contributed this lovely grey stuff. Excellent. But we needed to get all these people to harvest them, and so we sort of became very people oriented, and so we like our people who we work with to be our friends, and so we have this monstrous kind of log of friends who show up for harvest, you know, yeah, rightio, just a few minutes to go. So there we have some very, very fine looking young people, average height, about 6'1", you know, good shoulders. You know, when we have friends, we always check them out first, and you'll notice that there's a girl amongst them, and she's right up with them. She's an Amazon. Chris Penfold, right Penfold, wrong name. Right name, wrong Penfold. So Chris and I started mucking around with, you know, all sorts of wine, natural wine making, you know, not putting all of these cultivated yeasts and using a lot of sulphur, and so we started to get a bit of a name and a bit of following, and it was a bit too much product really in the end. So we did end up starting the farmers market down in Adelaide in order to move our stuff, because we had so many things, and the supermarkets and so forth, they don't know what to do with someone who says, I've got 150 different lines of fruit, nuts and vegetables. We keep on looking at our soil, so it's not like it's all, you know, just spiritual stuff, feeding them with our thoughts. We basically became great friends with Peter Wadowitz, who's the guy who started Peak Soils, which is a major composter, and he exports all sorts of gizmos all over the world to help people compost waste into something useful. So the pubs in Adelaide, if they have got a whole lot of waste food, or so, it'll go into the bio bin down in the dock, and it'll come out and it'll all be lovely juicy stuff by the time it comes out and go into Peak's compost. Don't ask him to pay you for it though, he's not interested in that. Well, so with this certified organic fertiliser, really balanced, because, you know, it was made out of all of the things that had kind of come off the place, we didn't have to muck around with all of these chemical fertilisers, and so we bit the bullet and became certified organic, and then our little critters would have free rein. And we used this spot up here. That's the scrub block, which is actually like a biological balance tank. There's lots and lots of little birds and insects and so forth that are predators, and so if we get, say, an imbalance in the pistachios or the poke fruit, we trust those little guys to get in there, and so we built that scrub using native species, and there you've got the green lacewing, and we specifically plant things that they will live on throughout the year so that they're ready to go when there's a pest outbreak, and they can come to the rescue and eat 1 million aphids a day and all that sort of thing. And that's why we, I guess, got so interested in the river, because the river was sterile. Like, it was just boxthorn and bloody castor oil, poisonous as hell, etc., etc. There was nothing left that was native except the big red gums. The rest was gone. And so we got Mad Max out with his digger, and we ripped it out, and we got people out, we got schools and volunteers, and we've got a whole video, an hour or so of how you do it. There you can see a visiting group just learning how you do this stuff. In terms of pistachios, we were organic. The factory that does all the grading and stuff is not, and we ended up chasing off overseas to get appropriate equipment to handle all of our stuff. So we got this dinky little village scale equipment from Sicily and Greece and so forth, and so we take it right through from growing to selling to the consumer. Carobs, another great crop which has got a lot of potential. One girl in South Australia is really making money out of it. That's Sophie Solomon from down at Port Elliot. All of those little bears. Those, what's his name? What is he, mate? Banjo bears. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, Adrian, but we did put some solar panels on the heritage roof, and we put some hot water panels. And then we wanted to build on, because that bloody house, it's so, like dark and low ceilings, and so we built an extension, but it was separate from the old house, and it was architected by John Maitland, who's a red hot, sort of energy engineer, and we whacked a stack of solar panels on it. So it's like a little earthship, like a little spaceship. So we use all of our effluent, we catch all of the rain, we create all of the electricity, and we export it, and we create our hot water. So like the thing is not there to just maintain and pay the rates. It makes us money, and it's just a matter of designing it cleverly. Outside we've got the market garden, which is like the beating heart. Every fortnight we know that we're going to be able to sell a whole lot of veg, and we've got our little workers. We've got about 5 part-time workers, and we also have the short courses that we give, including the Permaculture design course. And so each year we'll have a stack of people come in to learn how they can actually change their house, their garden, their life, and so on, whether it's a bigger place with an agroforest, with geese, or a tiny little place with just a few pots and so on. In getting the geese, which is very important because they gave us control over cooch and so forth, we gave ourselves a sanctuary, and so we actually brought in wallabies and bettongs, and the relation between bettongs and productive crops and so forth has been miraculous. And do you know what they like eating? Soursop bulbs. So, win, 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 win. Oh, too much. It's overwhelming. Well, this business of catching water, this kind of, you must have a, 500 litre tank or a 1,000 litre tank on your miserable house. I mean, it's nothing. Most houses in South Australia can handle 50,000, something like that, 40 or 50,000 litres. It's not expensive. You're not selling yourself to the devil or anything. So, and then don't waste it by putting a sprinkler on. Drip irrigation. It's a conversion. It's easy conversion. A lot of people say it's not worth growing vegetables. They're so cheap at Coles. Well, bloody oath they are, because they've been grown chemically. And if you get broccoli in the wintertime, in the summertime, it's likely to have been sprayed with something or other around about 20 times. Now, and last year, and the year before, and the year before that. I mean, what do we end up with? It is truly scary. But look at that, 13 lettuces in 6 weeks. You're talking about, $40 in 6 weeks off a square metre of garden. It's great. It's saving you heaps of dough. If you care about organics, it's absolutely marvellous. And it gives you exercise. And this is the way that we get our grey water back and our black water, so we can quite legally use our black water, that's the poo water, on
our fruit trees. It's a subsurface irrigation system. Okay, so we keep on running out of water. We did dig a bore and that started to go salty. So the question is, could we get water out of the river? And that started to go salty. And then we had a look at that big concrete drain running down the side of Clifford Road, and we thought, the lovely people of Gawler are not catching all of the stormwater. We will use just a little tiny bit of it. Enough water goes down that drain, if it's flowing well, to water our farm for a year. One day. So that's all we want. If that's all right with you?
Yeah.
Good. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think we'll just go past the environmental building, though it's very, very important. And a whole farm kind of looks like this. It's all this straw bale construction with a nice mortar or plaster, which is made with bright and light cement, so you get that sandstony kind of look. It's not, grey, it's sandstony. And this is a rather beautiful little bench made out of straw that we did, including an Aboriginal person, which has got all sorts of beautiful Aboriginal art images that were direct facsimiles from the rock art up in the South Para Gorge area. And that is a straw bale cold room, which will take 4 or 5 tonnes of green pistachios and keep them down at 0 degrees for as long as we need to. We also then got into dehydration and market the pistachios around Australia. We're the biggest growers of certified organic pistachios in the nation. We're still tiny, and that's our market stall. So every second Sunday we're there. Sometimes see us on telly. We've got a website with huge amounts of information, and we regularly kind of end up on telly. But if you want to sort of drop by, we have open days twice a year, so in spring and in autumn. So you're very welcome to come along and see if we do what we say we do. That's the list of things. So certified organic tucker, education, ecotourism, and publicly accessible information, and every now and then I've got time to do some consult work. And tonight we offer for only $20 the Food Forest movie, which is an hour, and it's also got a bonus virtual tour of half an hour. And once you've seen that, you're ready to change the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Boy, I'm glad so many people came tonight to hear that. That was fabulous. There must be questions, and I'll start the ball rolling with your walnuts. If you're going to pull them out, what are you going to put into place?
I'm going to put what you may know as Chinese dates, or red dates, or what they are really is jujubes. And you older ones probably would have been given a jujube by your granny if you had a sore throat. And so it was a fruit that always grew in China, and all of the expats would come back and then they would want a jujube, which they got up there as a dried fruit, something that would soothe their gullet. And it is the basis of much of the traditional Chinese medicine. It's came through Thursday fortnight ago unscathed, just said bring it on. And so we've got a lot of different cultivars. They're delicious. You can eat them while they're green, like an apple. You can wait until they're completely brown and they're starting to get a little bit more like a date. If you really want to play around with them, you can freeze dry them, and then they are exactly like the centre of a violet crumble bar. Oh. Delicious.
Questions? Yes. Stand up, please.
Is the macadamia nut an Australian native?
Yes.
Is the macadamia nut in Australia?
Yeah, so the macadamia is from sort of northern part of New South Wales and southern part of Queensland. It likes good water, and but it's capable of taking a bit of drought. It does not like salt. Yeah, but and I don't think it likes chlorine either. And so I would be like, if I was seriously going to grow a few, I would be splashing the chlorine out of it. That's just a matter of splashing the water out of the mains into a tank, and the chlorine will vapour off, rather than just putting it straight on. And I would avoid using any salty water. At the moment the mains water is pretty good, and our macadamia is looking absolutely rampant. They grow very well in South Australia. It's sort of a crazy crop to miss. And as a matter of fact, I do sell the best nutcracker for macadamias in the world, made in Queensland by Trevor Harry. It's got a great big lever, and even real old, weak people like me are able to crack those nuts. So, yeah, and that was one of the big problems with our pecan nuts, which come from the Mississippi Valley in America. They grow okay, and we took them to the show, to the market at the show, and we had all these nuts for sale, and people were, well, what's that? And it's a pecan nut. Oh, I like pecans, but how do I open them? And of course there was no proper pecan cracker available in Australia. Well, there was at one stage up in the hills an American woman who was leaving to go back to America. I don't know why, but she sold everything. And I saw this thing at the sale. I thought, wow, what is that? I put my thumb in and I thought, yeah, you could make a fair mess of your thumb. But you must crack the pecans end on end, and that way it just releases two beautiful halves. And so we now sell those two. Yes, so we do have an online shop.
Ros, your question. Stand up, please, stand up.
No, you don't need to.
Well,
Do you net your fruit?
Sorry?
Do you net your fruit?
Do you net your fruit?
We don't net our citrus, or our carrots, or our pistachios,
But the pine?
but the rest, yes. And pomegranates, I've started netting them this year. They're getting far too much attention from those evil parrots, yeah.
Question.
Hi. How important is it to you to plant native trees? You're talking about salt, you're talking about evaporation. I look with horror at what's happening in suburbia with these tiny backyards with no trees going in. We talk about being environmentally aware, and yet the house blocks are getting smaller and smaller. There's no backyard, no trees, no vegetation. How important is it for you to put aside some of your land for native trees, for the soil, for the environment?
Well, it's critical. As I mentioned, you know, we got interested in the Gawler River suddenly because we realised that it represented this tremendous, you know, biological balance tank that would give us all of the predators that we needed if we fixed it up. And so in these smaller backyards, I would be largely trying to provide shade using productive trees, because, you know, plenty of water, nice big citrus tree, big lemon tree. We went to, in Sicily, we went to a restaurant, the whole car park was just a lemon grove. It was absolutely amazing. And so if you could make, you know, that big water cost produce your shade, and it's productive shade, and then in terms of your biodiversity, whack in a great stack of insect-friendly or predator-friendly shrubs and grasses and salt bushes and those sorts of things. And so there's a very good palette, and you've got Adrian Shackley in the front row here, who is an absolute wizard when it comes to putting together a native garden of a particular sort of size, height, shape, whatever, and giving you kind of habitat for certain birds and insects and so on. But I mean, the business of creating habitat, you might think, what's this creating habitat? I mean, bloody hell, you know, where is this guy? You can seriously change who lives where, you know, that piece of dirt there, now bare, has almost nothing except ants living on it, and in 2 years that can be a vibrant place full of beneficial insects and really beautiful plants. You know, I mean, for us, we've got aeromophilus out the front, just outside the windows, just a little very low hedge. And the honey eaters, you know, they just go nuts in there. It's just absolute, well, it's much better than television. You know, you don't have to turn the sound up or down. It's really good.
Phil.
I've got 2 citrus trees.
Stand up.
One's a lemon, and one's a lime. They've got mixed up, the limes turn yellow, and the lemons have got that small, they're like golf balls.
Okay. Well, the limes that you're normally sold in South Australia are Tahitian limes. You won't get the East Indian limes really here. They won't survive, that's a tropical plant. But interestingly, the Tahitian lime, it was from Persia. It got taken by the Arab traders down to South Africa, and then for some unknown reason a boat took it to Tahiti, and so they became known as Tahitian limes, but they originated in Persia, and so they're really quite tough, and they are much more globular than the West Indian limes, and they, I think, are less fragrant, but still very different to a lemon. You look inside, it's distinctly green, and it's very distinct flavour, and it's excellent. And I think they are just as tough as lemons. Your lemons are probably suffering from low rainfall during the winter, and I would recommend that you really drench them, like really give them an enormous soak. See if you can get any salt that's there down a bit lower in the landscape, because I think that where people have just been doing little bits of water or dripping, that we're ending up with an accumulation of salt, and that's giving the poor old lemons a really hard time.
I've watered 20 minutes every second day.
With a
Spray.
yeah, I'd almost, yeah. That seems a lot. Maybe they're a bit light on for nitrogen. Yeah, might need a.
I'll give them all that first. Fertiliser.
Oh,
I've got
gosh.
hundreds of them.
Oh yeah.
They're rock hard.
Okay. Soil test required. Need a soil test. Like a standard soil test costs you about $100 though to get, to find out what's really there. Sorry, or a tissue test.
Or one.
Graham, wondering, you mentioned global warming has destroyed your walnut crop. Are we to expect all of our walnut trees to start dying?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Is that right?
Yeah, slowly but surely. I think you'll find that the very high temperatures are going to really just give them too much of a hard time. And while you've got SA water, it's pretty good. It's usually down around 300-400 parts per million, whereas we're up double that, more than double that. And so it's a conspiracy between extreme heat and the salt that really nails them. Yeah, I'd be planting jujubes.
I'll now ask Val to give further thanks.
Well, lovely. Okay. Oh yes, I forgot that. I'm glad I had a few minutes to catch my breath, Graham. An absolutely wonderful, energetic, passionate presentation. I'm still trying to assimilate it all, but to hear, we're relative newcomers to the Gawler area of 11 years, not to South Australia, that's nearly 50, but to Gawler area, and we love the country feel of it all. And hearing you talk about the Brookmans and the Raglesses, we can see how that was developed and the passion that was there. And it's just so wonderful to know that that passion and energy is still going on today. And I think that's what makes Gawler the place that it is, and a very welcoming place to come to. And maybe, thank you for your advice to my husband, maybe I'll get a better lemon when he's done what you've told him to do. So thank you, Graham. So on behalf of the lovely Gawler History Club, we'd like to thank you and ask you and Anne-Marie to accept that. If you would lift it rather, Graham, my shoulders are a bit funny. So thank you very much indeed, and we hope you'll enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have a few little goodies over there if you're interested in grabbing a DVD or a bag of pistachio nuts.